The bank statement arrived on my 18th birthday. I remember the envelope sitting on the kitchen counter next to the birthday card from my grandmother and a gift bag that probably contained another polo shirt from my parents. The envelope was thick, official looking, from Caldwell Trust and Estate Management. I had been waiting for this letter for 8 years, ever since the day Grandpa died and left me everything. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The first page was a letter congratulating me on reaching legal adulthood and informing me that I now had full access to the Marcus Theodore Caldwell Memorial Trust. The second page was the account summary. Current balance, $287,416.32. I stared at that number for a full minute before my brain could process what it meant. Grandpa had left me $2.3 million when he died. I was 10 years old. The money was supposed to sit in the trust, earning interest, waiting for me to turn 18 so I could use it for college, for starting my life, for whatever I needed. 8 years of compound interest should have made it worth even more than $2.3 million. Instead, I was looking at barely a tenth of what should have been there. Over $2 million had vanished from an account that only 3 people had access to. Me, who could not touch it until today, and my parents, who had been named trustees with the authority to manage the fund until I came of age. My name is Connor Caldwell, and on the morning of my 18th birthday, I discovered that my parents had stolen my entire future. This is the story of how I went from a working-class kid eating ramen in his bedroom to discovering I should have been a millionaire. This is the story of finding out that every time my parents said we could not afford something, they were lying while spending my inheritance on themselves. And this is the story of what happened when I decided to fight back. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that statement until my eyes blurred. The house was quiet. Dad was at his office, or at least that is what he had said when he left at 7 that morning. Mom was upstairs getting ready for the birthday dinner she had planned at some expensive restaurant I had never heard of. My little sister Emma was at school. Nobody knew I had the statement. Nobody knew that in the next few hours, everything was going to explode. The detailed transaction history started on page 3. I forced myself to read through it methodically, even though every entry made me feel sicker. The first withdrawal had been made 6 months after Grandpa's funeral. $50,000. Reason listed: educational expenses. I had been in 5th grade at a public school. There were no educational expenses. I grabbed a notebook and started documenting what I could remember from each year, cross-referencing it with the withdrawals. 5th grade, $50,000 for education. I remembered that year. We had lived in the same modest house. I had worn hand-me-down clothes from my cousin. Mom had said we could not afford the school field trip to Washington, D.C., so I had stayed home while my classmates went. I pulled up old photos on my phone and started cross-referencing dates. There was a photo from that 5th grade year. It was Halloween. I was wearing a homemade costume because Mom said we could not afford to buy one. She had helped me make a robot costume out of cardboard boxes and aluminum foil. I had been proud of it at the time, thought it showed creativity and resourcefulness. Now I knew that the same month I was wearing cardboard, my parents had withdrawn $50,000 from my trust fund. 6th grade, 3 withdrawals totaling $90,000. Medical expenses, the statements claimed. I had been perfectly healthy that year. The only doctor visit I remembered was a routine checkup covered by Dad's insurance through his job. $90,000 for a checkup that cost maybe $150. But I did remember something else from 6th grade. Dad had bought season tickets to the Red Sox. Really good seats, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars per game. He had taken his business associates, his friends, sometimes Emma. He had never taken me, said I would not appreciate them. that I would get bored. Now, I knew those tickets had cost thousands of dollars. My money. 7th grade. Another $60,000. Trust maintenance fees. I knew enough about finances to know that maintenance fees should be a percentage, maybe 1 or 2% per year, not $60,000 on a trust that was supposed to be worth over $2 million. 7th grade was also the year I had asked if I could take guitar lessons. All my friends were in band or taking music lessons. Mom had said we could not afford it. Music lessons would have cost maybe $30 a week, $1,500 a year. They could not afford $1,500 for guitar lessons, but could spend $60,000 on fake maintenance fees. I kept reading, kept documenting. 8th grade, $45,000. Another chunk for educational expenses. I was still in public school, still wearing clothes from the thrift store, still brown bagging lunches, because the school lunch program was $5 a day, and Mom said that was wasteful when we had food at home. But that was also the year Mom had gotten all new living room furniture. I remembered because it had been a big deal, redecorating the house. She had spent weeks picking out fabrics and styles. Dad had joked about how expensive her taste was, but said she deserved it. The furniture had probably cost $20,000 at minimum. Freshman year of high school, $75,000. Medical expenses again. I had sprained my ankle playing pickup basketball. 1 trip to urgent care, an x-ray, a prescription for ibuprofen. Total cost with insurance, maybe $200. They had claimed $75,000. That was also the year Dad had bought his first boat. Not the Tesla yet, but a boat. A 24-foot cabin cruiser that he kept at a marina. He had gone out on it maybe 6 times before deciding boating was not really his thing and selling it at a loss. The whole adventure had probably cost him $60,000. My $60,000. Sophomore year, $30,000. Junior year, $55,000. Senior year, $80,000. The amounts varied, but the pattern was always the same. Made-up reasons. Money disappearing. My future evaporating while they lived in comfort. I found my high school graduation photo on my phone. I was wearing a suit jacket that I had bought at Goodwill for $12. It had not fit quite right. Was a little too big in the shoulders, but it was all I could afford. I remember being self-conscious about it, hoping nobody would notice it was second-hand. Meanwhile, that same month, there was a withdrawal for $38,000. Living expenses for beneficiary. The beneficiary, who was wearing a $12 suit jacket to his own graduation. I thought about all the times I had felt guilty for wanting things. The time in 9th grade when I had asked for a new backpack because mine was falling apart and Mom had sighed and said money did not grow on trees. The time in 11th grade when I had wanted to go on the senior trip to Florida with my class, but it cost $800 and they said that was just not in the budget. The time I had applied for a summer program at a local college that would have looked great on my applications, but there was a fee and they said I needed to focus on working and saving money instead. Every single time, I had accepted it, had felt bad for asking, had told myself that was just how life was for working-class families. We sacrificed. We made do. We did not take vacations, or buy new things, or spend money on extras. That was what being responsible meant. Except it was all a lie. We were not a working-class family making sacrifices. They were wealthy people living off my inheritance while teaching me to be grateful for poverty. I kept reading, kept documenting. Each year brought more withdrawals, more lies. By the time I reached the present, the pattern was undeniable. Every reason given was a fabrication. Every withdrawal had been approved by James Caldwell and Patricia Caldwell, my parents, the trustees. I found the withdrawal from 2 years ago. $200,000. Investment, reallocation. That was the exact amount Dad's Tesla had cost. He had made a huge deal about paying cash for it, about how he had saved up for years, about how it was a reward for his hard work. I had believed him. I had actually felt proud of him for being financially responsible enough to save that much money. Another withdrawal caught my eye. $75,000, dated from the summer 3 years ago. Living expenses for beneficiary. That was the summer my parents and Emma had gone to Europe for 3 weeks. Educational tour, they had called it. Museums and historical sites and cultural enrichment for Emma. I had not been invited. They said someone needed to stay home and take care of the house. And besides, I had my job at the grocery store. I could not just take 3 weeks off. I had spent that summer working 40-hour weeks, eating ramen for dinner, watching my bank account slowly accumulate enough money to pay for college application fees. Meanwhile, my family was touring the Eiffel Tower and the Colosseum and the British Museum on my dime. Living expenses for the beneficiary. The beneficiary who was home alone eating instant noodles. I pulled up the photos on my phone from the past few years. Dad's new Tesla that he bought 2 years ago. Cash purchase, he had bragged. Mom's collection of designer handbags that lined the closet in their bedroom, each one worth thousands of dollars. The kitchen renovation last year that cost $80,000, according to Dad's proud announcement at dinner one night. The family trip to Europe that summer that I had not been invited to, because they said I needed to stay home and work my summer job at the grocery store while they took Emma on an educational tour. I scrolled further back. There was a photo from my 16th birthday. We had gone to a chain restaurant, nothing fancy. I had gotten a card with $50 in it and a used graphing calculator that I had specifically asked for because I needed it for math class and could not afford to buy one new. Meanwhile, that same month, there was a withdrawal from my trust fund for $35,000. Property maintenance, the statement said. I remembered that birthday so clearly. I had been grateful for the $50 and the used calculator. I had thanked my parents profusely. I had felt guilty for even asking for the calculator because I knew money was tight. That is what they always told me. Money is tight, Connor. We are doing our best. We cannot afford that. You need to learn the value of a dollar. You need to work for what you want. Every lecture about financial responsibility. Every time I had to say no to hanging out with friends because I could not afford movie tickets. Every shift at the grocery store where I stood on my feet for 8 hours scanning cereal boxes and bagging groceries so I could save up $300 for a school trip. All of it while they were spending thousands upon thousands of my money on themselves. I found a photo from Emma's 13th birthday party just last year. They had rented out a room at a country club. There was a DJ, a catered dinner, a cake from the expensive bakery downtown. Emma had gotten a new laptop, a new phone, and an iPad. The party had probably cost $5,000 at minimum, maybe more. My 18th birthday was today. I had gotten a card and a polo shirt, and the revelation that I had been robbed of my future. The bitterness was overwhelming. It was not even about wanting the expensive things they had bought for themselves, though that certainly stung. It was about the lies, the constant, unrelenting lies about why we could not afford things for me. The way they had made me feel guilty for wanting new shoes when mine had holes in them. The way they had praised me for being so mature and responsible when I worked instead of playing sports or joining clubs like my friends did. I had thought I was being a good son by not asking for much. I had thought I was helping the family by contributing my grocery store wages to my own expenses. I had thought my parents were struggling and doing their best. Instead, they had been living it up on my inheritance while teaching me the value of poverty and hard work. Every luxury they had enjoyed for the past 8 years had been purchased with my money. Money that Grandpa, my father's own father, had left specifically to me because he had not trusted his son with it. Grandpa had been right. I heard Mom's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly shoved the bank statement back into the envelope and slipped it into my backpack. I needed time to think, to figure out what to do with this information. Confronting them without a plan would be stupid. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Mom said, sweeping into the kitchen in a cloud of expensive perfume. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than I made in 6 months of bagging groceries. Her hair was freshly colored, her nails freshly manicured, her jewelry sparkling under the kitchen lights. All of it paid for with my inheritance. 18 years old. I cannot believe my baby is all grown up. She leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I had to physically restrain myself from pulling away. I had never been good at hiding my emotions, and right now I felt like my face must be broadcasting rage and betrayal. "Thanks, Mom," I managed to say. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, but she did not seem to notice. "Your dad should be home soon, and then we will head to dinner. I made reservations at Marcello's. You are going to love it. It is where all the important people go." She smiled at me, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just discovered she was a thief. "And we have a surprise for you." "Great," I said flatly. "Cannot wait." She finally picked up on my tone and frowned slightly. "Are you feeling okay? You seem off. Just tired. Didn't sleep well." It was not even a lie. I had been too excited about finally getting access to Grandpa's trust to sleep much. The irony was bitter. "Well, perk up. It is your birthday." She patted my shoulder and went to the fridge to pull out ingredients for lunch. "Oh, before I forget, this came for you." She handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. The return address was from a law office. Jensen and Associates. I did not recognize the name. "Who is it from?" Mom asked, her voice too casual, her eyes too focused on the package. "No idea." I lied, tucking it under my arm. "Probably something for graduation. I will open it later." I took the package upstairs to my room and locked the door. My heart was pounding as I tore open the brown paper. Inside was a letter from an attorney named Robert Jensen, along with several documents and a flash drive. The letter explained that Robert Jensen had been Grandpa's personal attorney and friend. Grandpa had apparently anticipated that my parents might misuse the trust funds, and he had left very specific instructions with Jensen. If I contacted Jensen's office after turning 18, he would provide me with evidence of any mismanagement. The flash drive contained 8 years of private investigator reports tracking every purchase my parents had made, with detailed documentation proving they had used my trust fund money for personal expenses. There was also a sealed letter from Grandpa, written shortly before he died. I opened it with trembling hands. "Connor," it began in Grandpa's neat handwriting, "if you are reading this," then I was right to worry. "I love my son, your father, but I know his weaknesses. He has always wanted the life he thinks he deserves more than he wanted to earn it honestly. Your mother enables him. I am leaving this money to you, not to them, because I believe you have the character they lack. But I am not naive. I know they will have access as trustees, and I know they may steal from you. If they do, fight back. The money is yours by right and by law. Robert Jensen will help you. Do not let them convince you that you owe them this money for raising you. Parents are supposed to raise their children. That is not a debt. That is a responsibility they chose. You owe them nothing. Be strong, Connor. Be better than your father. I believe you can be. With love, Grandpa." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Grandpa had known. He had tried to protect me even from beyond the grave, and I had been completely blind to what my parents were doing until this morning. I spent the next 2 hours going through the flash drive. The private investigator had been thorough. There were photographs of my parents at luxury car dealerships, at jewelry stores, at travel agencies. There were copies of receipts, credit card statements that showed charges at expensive restaurants and hotels, evidence of a second home they had purchased in Florida that I had never even known about. There were bank records showing the exact dates when money left my trust fund and appeared in their personal accounts. The investigator had documented everything with timestamps and locations. There were photos of Dad Test driving the Tesla, dated 2 days before the $200,000 withdrawal. Photos of Mom trying on a diamond bracelet at a jewelry store, dated the same day as a $45,000 withdrawal. Photos of them signing papers at a real estate office in Florida, dated 1 day after a withdrawal of $800,000. But what really got me were the photos that showed how carefully they had hidden this from me. There was a photograph of our family driveway from 3 years ago. Dad's old beat-up sedan was parked there, but there was a timestamp in the corner and a note from the investigator. Subject vehicle registered to James Caldwell, purchased 2 weeks prior for $65,000. Kept at office parking garage during business hours. Subject parks older vehicle at home residence, maintaining appearance of financial struggle. Dad had bought a luxury car and hidden it from me. He had deliberately parked the old car at home to maintain the illusion that we could not afford better. The level of deception was staggering. There were more photos like that. Mom shopping at designer stores, then coming home with bags from Target and TJ Maxx. The designer purchases had been hidden at her sister's house, according to the investigator's notes. Only brought home when I was at work or school. The Florida house was a revelation. The investigator had obtained property records showing it had been purchased 5 years ago. $800,000, paid in full, titled in my parents' names. It was a 3-bedroom beachfront property in a gated community. The photos showed a beautiful modern house with expensive furniture, a pool, a view of the ocean. The investigator had even tracked their visits. They had gone to Florida 17 times in 5 years, always when I was away. School trips, summer camps that I had won scholarships to attend, the one time I had gone to visit my aunt in California. Every time I was gone for more than a weekend, they had jetted off to their secret beach house. There were utility bills showing the house was lived in regularly. Cable bills, electricity, water. Receipts from restaurants near the property. Photos of Mom and Dad and Emma at the beach, at nice restaurants, living a completely different life than the one they showed me at home. Emma knew. The realization hit me hard. She had been to the Florida house. She had participated in this deception, even if she was just a kid. Had they told her to keep it secret from me? Had they bribed her with trips and gifts? Or had she just assumed this was normal, that some vacations included Connor and some did not? I felt betrayed by my entire family. Not just my parents, but Emma too, even though she was only 14 and probably did not understand what was really happening. She had gone to Disney World while I worked at the grocery store. She had swam in our pool while I picked up extra shifts. She had eaten at fancy restaurants while I ate ramen, and she had never once mentioned it to me. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My parents had stolen over $2 million from me, and they had been caught in 4K by a dead man who had loved me enough to make sure I would have recourse. Grandpa had hired this investigator years ago, probably right after he set up the trust. He had paid for years of surveillance. He had made sure that if his son betrayed his grandson, there would be proof. Indisputable, documented, photographed proof. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. On my way home. Excited for tonight. Got you something special. Something special. Probably bought with what was left of my trust fund. I called the number on Robert Jensen's card. A receptionist answered and transferred me immediately when I gave my name. "Connor Caldwell," Jensen said, his voice warm but professional. "Happy birthday. I have been hoping you would call, though I am sorry that you needed to." "You knew they were stealing from me this whole time?" I asked, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "Your grandfather suspected they would. He hired investigators to document everything in case legal action became necessary. The trust documents your parents signed had very specific language about how the funds could be used. Educational expenses meant tuition, books, school supplies paid directly to institutions. Living expenses for the beneficiary meant necessities for your care, with receipts required for anything over $1,000. They violated the trust agreement hundreds of times. We have proof of every violation. Can I sue them? Can I get the money back?" Yes to both questions. The evidence is overwhelming. But Connor, you need to understand what you are signing up for. Suing your parents is going to destroy your family. They will fight back. They will try to claim the money was legitimately spent on your behalf. They will paint you as an ungrateful child. It will get ugly. "They stole from me," I said, my voice hard. "They stole from their own son. For 8 years. And they were never going to tell me. If Grandpa had not set this up, I never would have known." "I agree completely," Jensen said. "I am just making sure you understand the reality. Your relationship with your parents will likely never recover from this." "I do not think I want it to," I said, surprised by how true the words felt. "What do I need to do?" "Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring the bank statement and any other documents you received from the trust. We will file a civil suit against your parents for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of trust funds, and fraud. We will also file a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. What they did is embezzlement. It is a felony. Criminal charges. Felony. My parents could go to prison. The thought should have horrified me. But instead I felt a grim satisfaction. They deserved consequences for what they had done. "What about my sister?" I asked. "She is only 14. If my parents go to prison, what happens to her?" That is a good question, and shows you are thinking more clearly than many people in your position would. Is there other family who could take her in? My mom's sister, Aunt Linda. She lives in Oregon. Emma likes her. We may be able to include provisions in any settlement that ensure your sister's care. But Connor, we need to move fast. Your parents now know you have access to the trust. They are going to know you have seen the statements. They are going to be preparing their defense." He was right. The birthday dinner tonight was probably not just a celebration. It was going to be damage control. They were going to try to explain away the missing money before I could do anything about it. "I will be at your office at 9 tomorrow morning," I said. "But tonight, I am going to that birthday dinner, and I am going to let them try to explain themselves." "Connor, I advise against confronting them without legal representation present. I am not going to confront them. I am just going to listen. I want to hear what lies they have prepared. I want to see if they feel even a little bit guilty." I paused, and I want to record them. If I am in Massachusetts, I can legally record a conversation I am part of without telling the other people, right? Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so actually no. You would need their permission to record, which they are not going to give. However, you can take detailed notes immediately after the conversation. Those can be used as evidence of your recollection of what was said. Fine. Notes then. I heard the garage door opening downstairs. Dad was home. I have to go. I will see you tomorrow morning. I hung up and quickly hid the flash drive and documents in a locked box under my bed. I took several deep breaths, trying to compose my face into something that would not immediately broadcast that I knew everything. Downstairs, I heard Dad's voice. "Where is the birthday boy?" I went down to the kitchen where Dad was already pouring himself a drink. He was in an expensive suit, his watch probably worth more than a year of my grocery store wages. He smiled when he saw me and pulled me into a hug. 18 years old, he said, his voice full of pride that felt like acid in my ears. My son, a man now. I am so proud of you, Connor. Proud of me for what? For not realizing I was being robbed? For working minimum wage while they lived in luxury paid for with my money? For being naive enough to trust them? Thanks, Dad, I said, extracting myself from the hug. Ready for dinner? We have a great night planned. And after dinner, we have your present. He exchanged a look with Mom that I could not quite decipher. The drive to the restaurant was torture. Emma chattered about her day at school, oblivious to the tension I could feel crackling in the air. Mom and Dad kept up a steady stream of small talk, asking me about my plans for college, reminding me that I needed to make decisions soon about which school I would attend. Of course, we will need to look at the financial aid packages carefully, Dad said. College is expensive these days. College is expensive. He was saying this while wearing a $2,000 suit purchased with money that was supposed to pay for college. The hypocrisy was stunning. Marcello's was exactly the kind of restaurant I had expected. White tablecloths, soft lighting, prices that were not listed on the menu because if you had to ask, you could not afford it. The host greeted my parents by name and led us to what was apparently their regular table. Their regular table at a restaurant where entrees started at $60. How many times had they eaten here on my dime while I was eating ramen in my bedroom? We ordered, and I let the conversation flow around me. I was watching my parents carefully now, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness. Mom seemed completely at ease, laughing and chatting with the waiter like she did not have a care in the world. Dad was slightly more tense, I noticed. He kept checking his phone, and his smile did not quite reach his eyes. The appetizers came. Oysters for Dad, some kind of fancy salad for Mom. I had ordered the cheapest thing on the menu out of habit, even though I was not planning to eat much. My stomach was twisted in knots. So, Connor, Mom said, dabbing her mouth with her napkin, have you given any more thought to which college you want to attend? The acceptance letters should be coming soon. I have been accepted to a few places already, I said, but I need to see the financial aid packages before I decide. College is expensive. It is, Dad agreed, cutting into his oyster. But do not worry too much about that. We will figure it out. Will we? I asked, because I was counting on the trust fund to help with tuition. But it turns out there is not as much there as I expected. The temperature at the table dropped about 20 degrees. Dad's knife stopped mid-cut. Mom's smile froze on her face. We will discuss that later, Dad said quietly. This is not the time or place. When is the time? I pressed, because I have been waiting 18 years for access to that money, and now that I have it, I would really like to understand where it went. Emma looked between us, confused. What are you talking about? What trust fund? Your grandfather left Connor a substantial amount of money when he died, Mom said, her voice tight. Connor just received his first statement today, and there seemed to be some questions about the management of the account. Some questions, I repeated. That is one way to put it. Another way would be to say that over $2 million is missing. Connor, Dad said sharply. Stop. Now. We will talk about this at home. No, I do not think I want to go home with you. In fact, I do not think I want to live in that house anymore. The house that was supposedly going into foreclosure before Grandpa died, but mysteriously stayed in the family. I wonder what saved it. Maybe a timely inheritance that was supposed to be mine. That is not what happened, Mom said, but her voice was shaking now. Your father and I worked very hard to keep this family afloat. The money from the trust was used for family expenses, for keeping a roof over your head and food on the table. Really? I pulled out my phone and opened the photos. This is the Florida house. The one you bought 5 years ago. $800,000. Does this look like keeping a roof over my head? I turned the phone so Emma could see. Her face went white. Mom reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. You took Emma to Florida 17 times. I continued. Every time I was away, every summer camp, every school trip, you went to the beach house. Did it never occur to you to invite me? Or was the whole point to enjoy my money without me? Connor, you do not understand, Dad started. Then explain it to me, I interrupted. Explain how educational expenses covered your Tesla. Explain how medical expenses paid for Mom's jewelry. Explain how trust maintenance fees somehow paid for European vacations that I was not invited to. Emma was crying now. I did not know. Mom and Dad, I did not know it was Connor's money. You said it was our family's vacation house. You said Connor did not want to come because he liked working. Because that is what they told you, I said, trying to gentle my voice for her. They lied to you too, Emma, just not as badly as they lied to me. We never lied, Mom said, but she was crying too now. We always intended to pay it back. We were going to replace the money before you turned 18. We just ran into some difficulties. 8 years of difficulties? I asked. 8 years of taking and never putting anything back. That is not borrowing. That is stealing. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and tried again. So, Connor, I imagine you received some mail today from the trust management company. Here it comes, I thought. Yeah, I got the statement. And I am sure you noticed that the balance is not quite what you were expecting. He said it so casually, like we were discussing the weather. It is about $2 million less than what Grandpa left me. I kept my voice level, curious to see how he would spin this. Mom jumped in. Sweetheart, we need to explain how trust management works. There are fees, investment losses, and of course the considerable expenses involved in raising a child. Your father and I have poured everything into giving you a good life. Investment losses, I repeated. The stock market has been up significantly over the past 8 years. If the money was properly invested, it should have grown, not shrunk. Dad's jaw tightened. It is more complicated than that. There were management fees, legal fees, taxes. And yes, we did use some of the funds for your benefit. That house you live in, your school expenses, your food and clothing, all of that costs money, Connor. The house we live in was purchased 15 years ago with a mortgage that is in your names, not from the trust. My public school is free, and I have been buying my own clothes with money from my job since I was 16, because you told me I needed to learn financial responsibility. The words came out harder than I had intended, but I was past caring about keeping up appearances. Watch your tone, Mom said sharply. We are your parents. We sacrificed everything to raise you. That money your grandfather left was as much ours as yours. We were a family. His wealth should have benefited all of us. Except Grandpa did not leave the money to all of us. He left it specifically to me. And he made you trustees, not owners. There is a difference. Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping dangerously low. Your grandfather was a bitter old man who tried to control us from beyond the grave. He never thought I was good enough, never gave me a real chance in the family business, never respected the choices I made with my own life. So he left everything to you out of spite, to punish me for not living up to his impossible standards. He wanted to make sure I knew that even in death, he thought his grandson was worth more than his own son. The pain in Dad's voice was real, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the Tesla, the jewelry, the beach house, and the sympathy evaporated. Or maybe, I said quietly, he left it to me because he knew you would steal it if you had the chance. Turns out he was right. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Emma looked confused and scared. Mom's face had gone pale, then red. Dad's hand was gripping his fork so hard his knuckles were white. "We did not steal anything," Mom hissed. "We used funds that we had legal access to as trustees. Everything we did was within our rights." Actually, it was not. I spoke to a lawyer this afternoon. The trust documents are very specific about how the money could be used. Educational expenses, medical necessities, living expenses for the beneficiary with proper documentation, none of which apply to your Tesla, your jewelry, your Florida vacation home that I did not even know existed until today. Dad's eyes widened. "How did you know about Florida?" "Grandpa knew you would do this. He hired investigators. He documented everything, every purchase, every withdrawal, every lie about what the money was for. He left it all for me with his attorney. And tomorrow morning, I am filing a lawsuit to recover what you stole." Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You ungrateful little bastard," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything we have done for you, we gave you a home, food, clothing. We raised you for 18 years. We could have given you up for adoption. We could have walked away, but we stayed. We sacrificed. We gave up our dreams to raise you. And this is how you repay us. You did the bare minimum required by law to not be charged with child neglect." I shot back, standing to face him. "That is not some noble sacrifice. That is basic parenting. And you do not get to bill your children for it by stealing their inheritance. Every parent feeds and houses their kids. That is literally the job description. You do not get a trophy for it, and you definitely do not get $2 million. We loved you," Mom said, and she was sobbing now. "We gave you everything we had. We scrimped and saved and worked ourselves to the bone to give you a good life. And you are going to destroy this family over money? Over dollars and cents. You destroyed this family when you decided to steal from your own son." I said, "I did not do this. You did. And now you are trying to make me feel guilty for having the audacity to be upset about it? That is manipulative and wrong, and I am done pretending it is anything else." Mom was crying now, loud theatrical sobs that were drawing attention from other tables. "How can you be so cruel? We are your parents. We love you. You love me. You stole my future. You stole the money that was supposed to give me opportunities. You stole it and spent it on luxuries for yourselves while I worked at a grocery store to save up money for college application fees. That is not love. I do not even know what that is, but it is not love." I stood up, throwing my napkin on the table. "I am leaving. Do not contact me unless it is through your lawyer, because I promise you, you are going to need one." Emma was crying now too, and I felt a stab of guilt. None of this was her fault. She was just a kid caught in the middle of our parents' greed and my justified rage. I walked around the table and knelt next to her chair. "Emma, I am sorry you had to see this. None of this is about you, okay? I love you, and I am going to make sure you are taken care of, no matter what happens with Mom and Dad." "Where are you going to go?" she asked through her tears. "I will figure something out, but I will call you, I promise." I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. I did not have a car. I had taken driver's ed, but could never afford a car of my own, and my parents had always said I could not borrow theirs because the insurance was too expensive. Another lie, another way to keep me dependent while they spent my money. I called an Uber and went to the only place I could think of, my best friend Jake's house. His mom answered the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. I spent that night on Jake's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner conversation over and over. Part of me felt guilty for blowing up at my parents in front of Emma. Part of me felt satisfied that I had confronted them, but mostly I just felt empty. I had spent 18 years thinking I was part of a family, and it turned out I was just a piggy bank with a birth certificate. The next morning, I was at Robert Jensen's office at 8:45, 15 minutes early. I brought copies of everything: the bank statement, the flash drive, Grandpa's letter. Jensen reviewed it all with the methodical precision of someone who had done this many times before. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of trust fund embezzlement I have seen," he said. "Your grandfather's documentation is extraordinary. With this evidence, your parents have no viable defense. The question is not whether you will win. The question is how much damage they are willing to endure before they settle. What are my chances of actually getting the money back?" I asked. "Good, but not guaranteed. They have already spent it. We will need to seize assets, which means going after the house, the cars, jewelry, any property they own. If they have hidden assets, we will need forensic accountants to find them. This is going to be expensive and time-consuming, but your grandfather established a litigation fund as part of the trust specifically for this purpose. You have $300,000 available to pursue legal action. At least Grandpa had thought of everything. How long will this take? Could be months, could be years. Depends on how hard they fight and how cooperative they are with asset disclosure. But Connor, there is something else we need to discuss. Your parents are going to fight dirty. They are going to try to paint you as a spoiled, entitled child who is suing his loving parents. They are going to air every mistake you ever made, every teenage rebellion, every bad grade. They are going to make you look bad to make themselves look better. Let them try," I said. "I have truth and evidence on my side. Truth and evidence matter in court. They matter less in public opinion. You need to be prepared for your friends, your extended family, people at school, everyone to have an opinion about this. And many of those opinions will not be kind to you." He was right. By lunchtime, my phone was exploding with messages. Apparently, Mom and Dad had spent the morning calling every relative, every family friend, everyone they knew, spinning their version of the story. I was ungrateful, delusional, manipulated by my grandfather's lawyer, trying to destroy the family over money. My aunt called. "Connor, your mother is devastated. How could you accuse them of stealing? They have given you everything." My cousin texted, "Dude, suing your parents? That is messed up." Messages from people I had not spoken to in years, all telling me I was wrong. That family comes first. That money is not worth destroying relationships over. The only person who seemed to understand was Emma. She sent me a short text. "I found papers in Dad's office. Receipts for things with your trust fund account number on them. Things we never needed. I believe you." That message meant more than all the others combined. Jensen filed the lawsuit that afternoon. Civil suit for breach of fiduciary duty, seeking full restitution of the embezzled funds, plus interest and legal fees. We also filed a criminal complaint with the district attorney. Within hours, the story had leaked to the local media. Local businessman sued by own son for trust fund embezzlement. Read the headline. The media coverage was brutal and immediate. My parents gave interviews painting themselves as victims of a vindictive child influenced by a hateful grandfather. I refused all interview requests on Jensen's advice, which meant their narrative was the only one out there for days. I watched them on the local news, Mom crying about how she could not believe her son would do this to them. Dad looking haggard and claiming they had done everything according to proper trust management procedures. The comment sections online were vicious. People I had never met felt qualified to judge me. Spoiled rich kid suing his parents. Ungrateful brat doesn't understand how expensive it is to raise a child. This is what's wrong with young people today. No respect for family. But then the investigators Jensen hired found the Florida house, a 3-bedroom beachfront property worth over $800,000, purchased with a direct transfer from my trust fund and titled in my parents' names. The media got photographs of it. Photographs of my parents vacationing there. Photographs of the luxury furniture inside, the pool, the view. The narrative started to shift. Parents of trust fund beneficiary-owned secret vacation home was much harder for them to spin, especially when Jensen released carefully selected financial records showing the direct connection between trust withdrawals and the property purchase. Suddenly, the comments sections were on my side. Those parents are thieves. Can you imagine stealing from your own child? Good for him for standing up for himself. The legal process itself was grueling. There were depositions where my parents' lawyers grilled me for hours, trying to find inconsistencies in my story or evidence that I had somehow benefited from the trust funds. They asked about every birthday gift I had ever received, every meal I had eaten, every piece of clothing I had worn. They tried to calculate a dollar amount for raising me and argue that my parents were entitled to reimbursement. Jensen shut that down quickly. The law is very clear, he told the court. Parents have a legal obligation to provide for their minor children. They cannot bill those children for basic necessities and use it to justify embezzling trust funds. If that were allowed, every trustee parent could empty their child's inheritance and claim it was payment for raising them. My parents' depositions were even worse, from what Jensen told me. Mom had broken down, crying multiple times, unable to explain specific withdrawals or where the money had gone. Dad had been belligerent, insisting that Grandpa had wanted the family to benefit from his wealth, that the trust documents were just technicalities. That intent mattered more than specific language. But then Jensen brought out the private investigator's documentation. Photographs time-stamped and dated. Receipts with signatures. Bank records showing the money trail. Dad's lawyer had tried to object, to claim the surveillance was illegal or inadmissible. But Grandpa's attorney had been smart. Everything had been obtained legally, through public records and observation from public spaces. The most damaging evidence came from my parents' own emails and text messages, which we obtained through the discovery process. There were messages between Mom and Dad discussing the trust fund, talking about how much they could take without me noticing, joking about how Grandpa would be rolling in his grave if he knew they were spending his precious grandson's money on themselves. There was one text exchange that Jensen read aloud in court that made even the judge wince. Mom had texted Dad. Connor asked why we couldn't afford the school trip. I told him money was tight. Meanwhile, we're literally sitting on $2 million of his money. I feel terrible. Dad had responded, "Don't feel guilty. Your father wanted to control us, even after death. This is our way of taking back power. Connor will inherit enough when we die anyway." When that exchange was entered into evidence, I saw several people in the courtroom shake their heads in disgust. My parents had known exactly what they were doing. They had felt guilty about it, and they had done it anyway, year after year, justifying it as some kind of rebellion against Grandpa's control. The district attorney's office called. They were opening a criminal investigation. My parents needed to hire criminal defense attorneys in addition to their civil attorneys. The legal fees were bleeding them dry, and they had not even gotten to trial yet. 6 weeks after I filed the lawsuit, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my father. "Connor, we need to talk. Face to face. Please. Anything you want to say to me can be said through your lawyer to my lawyer." I said, "Please, son, I am begging you. Just give me 1 hour. Meet me somewhere public if it makes you feel safer. But I need to talk to you." Against my better judgment, and against Jensen's advice, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the house. I made sure to bring my phone, and I texted Jake my location and told him to call the police if I did not check in within 90 minutes. Dad looked terrible. He had lost weight. His eyes were sunken. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. Part of me felt a flicker of sympathy Most of me remembered the $2 million. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as I sat down across from him. "You have 1 hour. Talk." "Connor, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Your mother and we made terrible choices. We told ourselves we were just borrowing the money, that we would pay it back before you turned 18. We convinced ourselves that we deserved it after years of being cut out of your grandfather's will, of watching him give everything to you. We were jealous of our own son. How messed up is that?" "Pretty messed up," I agreed. "The thing is, we were drowning. The business your grandfather cut me out of, I tried to start my own version. It failed. We had debts. The house was going into foreclosure. We were about to lose everything. And there was all this money just sitting there, and we had access, and it was so easy to convince ourselves that we needed it more than you did, because you were just a kid and did not understand. So you stole it." "Yes, we stole it. And then once we started, it got easier to justify the next withdrawal and the next one. The Tesla was not a necessity, but we told ourselves you would benefit from it, because we could drive you places. The vacation was not for your education, but we told ourselves we needed it to de-stress so we could be better parents. Every time, we found a way to make it about you when really it was always about us." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because the criminal investigation is serious. The district attorney told our lawyer they are considering filing charges. If they do, your mother and I could go to prison. And if that happens, Emma becomes a ward of the state, unless a relative takes her in. Your Aunt Linda will probably get her, but Emma will lose her home, her school, her friends, everything, and it will be because we were greedy and weak." "That is not my fault," I said, though I felt the guilt he was trying to cultivate in me. "I know it is not your fault. It is ours, completely ours. But Connor, you have the power to make this easier or harder. If you drop the criminal complaint, the district attorney will probably drop the investigation. The civil suit can continue. You can get a judgment against us, seize our assets, ruin us financially. We deserve that, but at least we would not go to prison. Emma would still have her parents, even if we lose everything else." "And what do I get out of this?" I asked. "Besides the satisfaction of knowing I protected my sister, we will cooperate fully with the asset recovery. We will not fight the civil suit. We will agree to a judgment for the full amount you are owed plus interest and legal fees. We will sell the house, the cars, the Florida property, everything. We will liquidate our retirement accounts. Whatever we can scrape together, you get. And we will both get jobs, real jobs, and we will work out a payment plan for whatever is still owed. It might take the rest of our lives, but we will pay you back." I looked at my father, this man who had once been my hero, now reduced to begging his son for mercy he did not deserve. I thought about Emma, who had already lost her big brother, who could lose her parents too. I thought about Grandpa, who had left me the evidence because he wanted me to fight back, but who also had loved his son despite everything. "I need to talk to my lawyer," I said finally. "That is fair. That is more than fair. Connor, I know I do not have the right to ask this, but I am asking anyway. Can you ever forgive us? Not now, maybe not for years, but someday." "I do not know," I said honestly. "What you did was not just theft. It was betrayal. You were supposed to protect me, to look out for my interests, and instead you stole my future to fund your lifestyle. That is not something you can just apologize away." "I know, but I am still sorry, and I still love you, even though I know you have every reason to doubt that." I left the coffee shop feeling more confused than when I arrived. I called Jensen and told him about the conversation. "He is trying to manipulate you," Jensen said immediately. "The parents always do this. They wait until they realize they are going to lose, then they come crying with apologies and sob stories about family. Do not fall for it. But what about Emma? If they go to prison, her life gets destroyed. Emma is not your responsibility. She has an aunt who will take care of her. You cannot sacrifice justice because you feel guilty about collateral damage from your parents' crimes. But I do feel guilty. She is my little sister. She did not do anything wrong. Jensen sighed. Connor, this is your decision. I can only advise you. If you want to drop the criminal complaint, we can do that. But understand what you are giving up. Without the threat of criminal charges, your parents have less incentive to cooperate. They might drag out the civil case. Hide assets. Make this as difficult as possible. Criminal charges are leverage. I spent 3 days thinking about it. 3 days weighing justice against mercy, revenge against family, what I was owed against what Emma needed. In the end, I called the district attorney's office and asked them to drop the criminal investigation in exchange for my parents' full cooperation with the civil suit. The DA was not happy about it, but they agreed. Without my cooperation as the victim, their case was weaker anyway. My parents kept their word. They did not contest the civil suit. They agreed to a judgment for the full $2 million plus interest, which brought it to over $2.4 million with 8 years of compound interest calculated. They sold the Florida house, the cars, the jewelry. They took out a second mortgage on our family home. They liquidated their retirement accounts. In total, they managed to scrape together about $900,000. It was not the full amount, but it was more than I had expected to recover. Jensen negotiated a payment plan for the remaining $1.5 million, structured as a lien against their future earnings. They would be paying me back for the rest of their working lives. The house had to be downsized. They moved to a small rental in a cheaper neighborhood. Dad got a job as a regional manager at a hardware store chain, a massive step down from the business owner lifestyle he had been pretending to have. Mom went back to work as a bookkeeper. Emma had to change schools, which she was upset about, but Aunt Linda helped smooth the transition. As for me, I took the $900,000 and invested most of it in a diversified portfolio. I used some of it to pay for college tuition and living expenses. I enrolled at a state university with a good pre-law program. The irony was not lost on me. I had started this journey thinking I wanted to be a doctor. Now I wanted to be a lawyer, specializing in elder law and estate planning. I wanted to help other people protect their assets from family members who might betray their trust. I did not speak to my parents for almost a year, not out of spite, but because I genuinely did not know what to say to them. They had apologized, they had paid what they could, they had faced consequences. But the relationship we had before was gone, incinerated in the fire of their betrayal and my lawsuit. Emma and I stayed close. I visited her every few weeks, took her out for dinners and movies. I helped her with homework and college applications. I told her stories about Grandpa, the man she barely remembered but who had loved her too. She was caught in the middle of our family's implosion, old enough to understand what had happened, but young enough to still need her parents. One evening, about 6 months into the lawsuit, Emma and I were sitting in a diner sharing a basket of fries. She had been quiet all night, picking at her food, not making eye contact. "What is wrong?" I finally asked. "Mom and Dad are talking about declaring bankruptcy," she said quietly. "The legal fees are destroying them. Dad might lose his job because the publicity is so bad. We are probably going to lose the house. And I keep thinking this is all because of me." "Because of you?" "Emma, you did not do anything wrong. But I went on those trips. I went to the Florida house. I spent that money too, even if I did not know where it came from. And now our whole family is falling apart, and you are not talking to Mom and Dad, and everything is just broken. Maybe if I had said something, if I had told you about Florida, you could have stopped them sooner, and it would not be this bad." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Listen to me. You were a kid. You are still a kid. This is not your fault. Mom and Dad made choices. Bad choices. Illegal choices. You did not make those choices for them. And yeah, our family is broken right now. But it was already broken. I just did not know it yet. They broke it when they decided to steal from me. I am just refusing to pretend it is not broken. Do you hate them? She asked, tears streaming down her face. I thought about it carefully. No, I do not hate them. I am angry. I am hurt. I feel betrayed. But I do not hate them. They are still my parents. They still raised me. Those things are complicated and can coexist. I can be angry at what they did and still love them in some messed up way. Do you think you will ever forgive them? I do not know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And it does not mean pretending it did not happen. It means deciding that I am not going to let what they did define the rest of my life. I am not going to let their theft steal my future twice. Once by taking the money, and once by making me bitter and angry forever. That is very mature, Emma said, managing a small smile. Yeah. Well, having to sue your parents for embezzlement will mature you real fast, I said, trying to lighten the mood. When Emma graduated high school 2 years later, the lawsuit was settled, but our family was still fractured. I set up a trust fund for her from my settlement money. Not as much as Grandpa had left me, but enough to pay for college without loans. And I made sure my parents had no access to it, no ability to touch it, no way to steal from her the way they had stolen from me. The trust documents I created for Emma were ironclad. Jensen helped me write them. They specified that the money could only be used for tuition, books, housing, and reasonable living expenses, all requiring receipts. Any other use required approval from an independent trustee that I had appointed, a financial advisor who had no connection to our family. Emma would have access to detailed quarterly statements. Everything was transparent and documented. On her graduation day, she pulled me aside after the ceremony. Thank you for everything you did, for the trust fund, for not giving up, even when everyone said you should. For showing me that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is hard. You are my sister, I said, pulling her into a hug. Someone had to protect you. Mom and Dad were not going to do it. They asked me to tell you they are proud of you, she said quietly, for graduating college, for getting into law school, for everything. They know they do not have the right to say it directly, but they wanted you to know. I felt that familiar, complicated tangle of emotions. Anger, still, because the wounds were not fully healed. Sadness for what we had lost as a family, but also something that might have been the beginning of forgiveness, or at least understanding. Maybe someday I will be ready to hear that from them directly, I told Emma, but not yet. It took another year before I agreed to family therapy. Emma had been begging me for months, and finally I gave in. We found a therapist who specialized in family financial trauma, which apparently was common enough to be a specialty. The first session was excruciating. We all sat in a circle in the therapist's office, nobody making eye contact. Mom cried through most of it. Dad sat with his arms crossed, defensive and angry, even though he was supposedly there to make amends. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, did not let anyone off easy. She made my parents walk through their choices step by step, explaining the decision-making process that led them to steal from their own child. She made them acknowledge the impact on me, on Emma, on our family. She made me articulate my anger and hurt without letting it turn into attacks. Over months of sessions, slowly, painfully, we started to communicate, not like we used to, because we could never go back to that, but in a new way, one built on honesty instead of lies. Dad finally admitted that he had been jealous of me, that Grandpa's decision to leave everything to me had felt like a final rejection, a statement that even in death, his father thought more of his grandson than his own son, that the theft had been partly about the money, but mostly about reclaiming some sense of power and control in a relationship where he had always felt powerless. "I know that does not excuse it," he said during one session, tears running down his face. "I know I took my issues with my father out on you. I stole your future because I felt like mine had been stolen. It was wrong. It was cruel. And I am sorry." Mom admitted that she had known it was wrong from the beginning, but had convinced herself it was justified, that she had told herself we were a family and family shares everything, that she had rationalized every withdrawal until the lies became easier than the truth. "I watched you struggle," she said, looking at me directly for the first time in months. "I watched you work those terrible jobs and stress about money and deny yourself things you wanted. And I did nothing because acknowledging that would have meant admitting what we were doing to you. It was easier to pretend you were learning responsibility than to face the fact that we were stealing your opportunities. The therapy did not fix everything. You cannot undo years of betrayal with a few months of honest conversations. But it started something, a foundation that might someday support a real relationship again. I graduated from college with honors. I got into a top law school. I used my story, the story of how my grandfather's foresight and evidence helped me recover what was stolen, as the basis for my law school admissions essay. It resonated with the admissions committee. Apparently, stories of 18-year-olds suing their parents successfully are memorable. The relationship with my parents slowly evolved. There was no going back to the innocent trust of childhood, but we found a new equilibrium, one built on honesty and clear boundaries. They had hurt me, but they were also human beings who had made catastrophic mistakes out of weakness and greed. I could acknowledge their humanity without excusing what they had done. The truth is, becoming an adult at 18 did not mean what I thought it would. I thought it would mean finally having access to the money Grandpa left me, freedom to make my own choices, the beginning of my independent life. Instead, it meant discovering betrayal, hiring lawyers, making impossible decisions about justice and family. It meant growing up fast in ways I had never anticipated, but it also meant learning that I was stronger than I thought, that I could stand up for myself even when everyone told me I was wrong, that I could make hard choices and live with the consequences, that I could be both angry at my parents for what they did and still love them in a complicated way. Grandpa had been right. I was better than my father, not because I was morally superior, but because when faced with a choice between right and easy, I chose right. Even when it was painful, even when it cost me my family for a while, even when everyone told me to let it go, the money was important. It represented my future, my opportunities, the security Grandpa had wanted me to have. But the lawsuit was never really about the money. It was about refusing to be a victim. It was about demanding accountability from the people who were supposed to protect me. It was about proving that being young does not mean you have no power. I am 25 now. I just finished my second year of law school. I have already started working with an estate planning firm, helping families set up trusts and safeguards to protect their children from the exact situation I went through. I tell my clients about Grandpa's foresight, about the importance of choosing trustees carefully, about building in accountability measures. And sometimes on quiet evenings, I pull out Grandpa's letter and read it again. "Be strong, Connor. Be better than your father. I believe you can be." He believed in me before I believed in myself. He gave me the tools to fight back, even though he knew it would tear our family apart. He loved me enough to prepare for the worst, while hoping for the best. I keep a photograph of him on my desk. In it, he is smiling, his arm around 10-year-old me, both of us covered in paint from a project we had been working on in his garage. I was happy in that picture. I did not know yet that he was sick. I did not know that in a few months he would be gone. I did not know that he was already making plans to protect me from my own parents. But he knew, and he did it anyway, because that is what real love looks like, not the performative love my parents showed while stealing from me, but the hard, practical, protective love that makes difficult decisions and accepts that they might not be appreciated until much later. I carry both examples with me. The lesson of what not to do from my parents. The lesson of how to love and protect from Grandpa. Together, they made me who I am today. Someone who understands that family is complicated, that love and betrayal can coexist, that sometimes the most adult thing you can do is refuse to accept less than what you deserve. The human heart is bigger than we think. It can hold contradictions. It can love people who have wronged us. It can be angry and grateful at the same time. It can mourn the past while embracing the future. It can contain multitudes. I carry both names now, both histories. The son of the Caldwells, who raised me in struggle and love. The grandson of the Caldwell, who protected me from beyond the grave. Someone who has been through something extraordinary and traumatic, who understands both worlds in a way few people can. And I realized something important. Becoming an adult is not about choosing one identity over another. It is about having the courage to hold all your truths at once, even when they contradict each other. It is about understanding that family can be both the people who raised you and the people you came from, and that love is complicated enough to encompass both. The story of what happened to me is not really about the money or the lawsuit or even the lies. It is about the moment when everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down, and you have to decide who you are going to be in the aftermath. It is about learning to carry multiple histories without letting any of them define you completely. On the days when it feels too overwhelming, when the weight of two lives feels like too much to carry, I remember that I am not alone. I have a sister who loves me and who I protected. I have parents, flawed and human, who are trying to make amends. I have a second chance that most people never get, a chance to reclaim what was stolen while also honoring what I built from that theft. It is enough. Not perfect, not simple, not what anyone would have chosen, but it is enough. And some days, that is all any of us can ask for. Thank you for listening to my story of growing up faster than I ever wanted to. I have left 2 more stories on your screen, both from young men who learned that sometimes becoming an adult does not happen at 18. It happens the moment your family needs you to be strong. Click on whichever one speaks to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be forced to grow up overnight, that notification bell is waiting. Until tomorrow, remember, age is just a number, but courage defines who you really are.